Hey everyone, welcome to The Open Question. From the earliest days of human history, people have told stories. Stories about the sky, the sun, the wind, and the things they couldn't explain. These stories eventually became beliefs. And over time, beliefs turned into systems. Systems with rules, leaders, rituals, punishments, and rewards. That's how religions were born. Not from facts, but from fear, confusion, and the deep human need for control. In the beginning, the world was a mystery. Storms came without warning. Crops failed for no clear reason. People died young. Disease spread without any understanding of germs. Lightning struck out of nowhere. When things went wrong, people looked for meaning. They couldn't accept randomness. They needed someone, or something, to blame or praise. And so they created gods. These gods explained everything they didn't understand. Thunder was the sound of a god's anger. Drought meant the gods were displeased. A good harvest meant the gods were happy. It was a simple system. And for people who didn't have science or history or medicine, it worked. It gave them answers, even if those answers were wrong. A wrong answer often feels better than no answer at all. But religion wasn't just about answers. It was also about power. In every ancient civilization, those who claimed to speak for the gods became the most powerful people in society. The priests, shamans, or prophets controlled what people believed, how they lived, and who they could marry or kill. If you disagreed with them, you weren't just wrong, you were dangerous. You were going against the gods themselves. That's a clever system. You can't argue with invisible authority. The connection between religion and power has always been strong. Kings claimed to rule by divine right. Conquerors said their god wanted them to expand. Slavery was justified in holy texts. Women were told to obey because it was God's will. Homosexuality was condemned as sin. Questioning these things wasn't just rebellion, it was blasphemy. And blasphemy was punishable by death. Over time, different religions formed around different cultures, but they shared the same structure. A creator. A set of moral laws. Rewards for obedience. Punishments for disobedience. Rituals. Sacred texts. Religious holidays. Places of worship. But look closely, and you'll see the same pattern repeating over and over. The details change, but the formula stays the same. Because it's not divine, it's human. It's made by people for people. Religions also offered comfort. That's one of the most powerful tools they had. When someone died, religion offered the idea of an afterlife. When life was unfair, religion promised justice in another world. Suffering was seen as a test or a divine plan. People were told they weren't alone, that someone was watching over them. This helped people cope. But it also made them easier to control. If you believe your suffering has meaning, you're less likely to fight back. If you think your poverty is part of a divine plan, you won't question the system. If you believe a better world is waiting after this one, you'll endure almost anything. That's why religion often thrived in places where people were poor, oppressed, or desperate. It gave hope, but not solutions. And in many cases, it kept people from demanding real change. Religion also created in-groups and out-groups. It defined who belonged and who didn't, who was chosen and who was lost, who was pure and who was sinful. This division caused endless conflict, crusades, inquisitions, witch hunts, jihads, ethnic cleansing. Religious wars have killed millions of people across history, and they still do. One of the strangest things about religion is how much it resists change. In science, if a theory is wrong, it gets replaced. In law, bad rules can be overturned. But in religion, even the most outdated ideas can survive for centuries. Why? Because questioning the system is forbidden. Belief is considered a virtue. Doubt is a sin. That's not how truth works. But it's how control works. Religions often claim to have moral authority, but their moral codes are usually stuck in the time they were created. Rules written thousands of years ago are still followed today, even when they no longer make sense. Some religious texts condone slavery, treat women as property, punish people for working on certain days, or call for violence against outsiders. And yet these texts are still called holy. People say religion teaches kindness, charity, and compassion. And yes, some do. But you don't need religion for those values. Kindness existed before holy books. Empathy is part of being human. There are people without religion who are deeply moral. And there are religious people who commit terrible crimes. Belief doesn't guarantee goodness. And disbelief doesn't mean evil. The truth is, religion was a tool for explaining the unknown, a tool for creating order, a tool for giving hope, and, most importantly, a tool for controlling people. It served a purpose in a time when humanity didn't know better. But we do now. We have science. We understand weather, disease, and natural disasters. We've mapped the universe. We've decoded DNA. We've landed on the moon. And yet, people still pray for rain. They still think a virus is punishment. They still believe their God will help their team win a game, or help them find parking, or reward them for avoiding certain foods. That's not faith. That's superstition with branding. Religions also evolved with society. New religions borrowed from old ones. Christianity borrowed from Judaism. Islam borrowed from both. Even Hinduism absorbed ideas from earlier belief systems. You can trace the lineage of many beliefs back through history and see how they were shaped by politics, geography, war, and trade. They didn't fall from the sky. They were built, brick, by human hands. Even religious rituals often have roots in earlier, pagan traditions. Christmas trees, Easter eggs, fasting, fire festivals. These weren't originally religious. They were seasonal, cultural, or symbolic. Religion just absorbed them to make the system more attractive, more relatable, more popular. It was marketing before marketing existed. The more you study religion, the more human it looks. Its inconsistencies, its contradictions, its biases, they all make sense when you realize it wasn't written by gods. It was written by people. People with limited knowledge, strong emotions, and a desire for control. That's why the God in these stories often behaves like a jealous king, not an all-knowing creator. He rewards loyalty, demands worship, and punishes disobedience. That's not divine behavior. That's political behavior. Religions also tend to reflect the culture they came from. In patriarchal societies, gods are male. In warlike cultures, gods are violent. In tribal societies, gods favor their group over others. That's not a coincidence. It's a projection. People made gods in their own image, not the other way around. Even the concept of sin is more about control than morality. Many so-called sins aren't about harming others. They're about disobeying rules. Eating certain foods, dressing a certain way, praying at specific times. These aren't universal truths. They're cultural norms dressed up as divine law, and they serve one purpose, to mark obedience. If you follow the rules, you belong. If you don't, you're an outsider. That's not morality, that's tribalism. Religions promise certainty in a world full of uncertainty. They promise meaning in a world that often feels random. They promise comfort in the face of death. And for many people, that's enough. But the cost of that comfort is high. It means accepting things without evidence. It means not asking questions. It means believing things that often go against logic, science, and compassion. Some people argue that religion brings people together. And sometimes it does. But so do music, sports, language, and shared goals. We don't need ancient myths to feel connected. We need understanding. We need education. We need truth. There was a time when religion was the only framework people had. But that time has passed. Today, we can build ethics without dogma. We can find purpose without superstition. We can face death without fairy tales. We can live good lives without being told we're being watched by an invisible judge. The question isn't why religion existed. The question is why it still does. In the end, religions weren't created by gods. They were created by people, out of fear, out of ignorance, out of the desire for control. And once created, they took on a life of their own, passed from generation to generation, embedded in culture, protected by power. But just because something is old doesn't mean it's true. Just because something is widespread doesn't mean it's right. We outgrew myths about monsters under the bed. We outgrew stories about the earth being flat. Maybe it's time we outgrow the idea that the universe revolves around us and that a supernatural being is keeping score. Some truths are hard, but they're better than comforting lies. And sometimes growing up means letting go of the stories that no longer serve us. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.